I thought we talked today about socialism. It really does seem to be everywhere. We've talked a little bit about Mamdani winning the Democratic nomination in New York City. I just read today that another socialist was elected to be the Democratic candidate for mayor in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So we've got two major U.S. cities with explicitly socialist mayoral candidates. At least Mamdani seems to be ahead in the polls, so he seems to be favored by many. But it's more than that. This goes beyond New York or Minneapolis. In one survey, 62% of American young people had a positive opinion of socialism. 34% had a positive view of communism. Only 46% had a positive impression of big business, lower than in previous polls, I guess, previous generations, previous years. So young people are clearly, dramatically, significantly tilting towards socialism. And this goes beyond kind of woke. This is a lot more explicitly, economic socialism. Remember, Mamdani wants to run government-run or city-run grocery stores. He wants to have the buses and the subways run for free. He wants to. He wants the means of production. I mean, he's a much more classic socialist. Now, he also, on top of that, he's got defund the police and bringing in social workers and all of that. But that's kind of that's in addition to. So it goes beyond just the woke and the anti-colonialism and the pro-Hamas and all of that. But it also has this economic dimension that socialists have always had. So it's definitely a phenomena out there, and it's a phenomena that keeps rearing its very, very, very ugly head. Socialism is a very, 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 very ugly idea. And it's a real question of why. Why does it keep coming back? Why do we keep getting, socialism? Why is it so attractive for young people? And I think the question to this is particularly interesting given the struggle that most intellectuals out there are having in trying to explain it. I mean, the reality is that, what do you do about it? It's every generation has to face the same issue. Every generation has to relearn. It's as if everybody knows socialism doesn't work, but it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back. I watched a video of what's his name? The Ukrainian named guy Kissin and in the UK, right? Incredibly articulate, really, really smart, good guy. He gets it. And basically his explanation was, socialism keeps coming back because, young people are fed up of paying high cost of housing, and they've all got tuition, they've all got student loans and debt. Maybe, right? Konstantin Kissin, thank you. So that's why they become socialist, as if the solution to high student debt and high cost of housing is going to be rent control. I mean, again, Econ 101 suggests the opposite. Or privatizing grocery stores is somehow, not privatizing, having the government run grocery stores somehow is a solution to high cost of living, or if there is a high cost of living. Note that the socialists, as they always have been, in all of history, I think, the socialists are the educated. The socialists are the more intellectual. They're the ones that have gone to school. They're the ones who've studied ideas. They don't have an excuse of ignorance, certainly not an excuse of stupidity. And yet they keep spouting ignorant and stupid ideas. So what is it? And I think what's also interesting here is, why don't our intellectuals get what's going on? Now, this came to mind in particular because Tyler Cowen, who's a libertarian, small L libertarian economist at George Mason University, has written an essay in the Free Press, wrote it earlier this month, "Why Won't Socialists Die?" And he kind of a little bit reviews the literature. He says, a lot of intellectuals have faced this question for generations now. They've been asking, why won't they die? They fail, and they fail, and they fail, and they fail, and they fall flat on their face over and over and over and over again. And yet a new generation keeps getting born and keeps having to experience the falling flat on their face anew, right? They have to start over. And of course, socialists have, every generation of socialists have a complicated, detailed list of excuses for why they failed. Like, Cuba's not doing well because of American sanctions. I read this today. Cuba's not doing well because of American sanctions. It's all America's fault. And yet, in spite of the fact that Cuba's very poor, Cubans are super happy. Like, they're the happiest people ever. They're much happier than Americans. It probably explains why so many Americans are willing to get into rafts and try and row to Cuba in shark-infested waters just to get away from America and to go to the happiness capital of the world, Cuba. Socialists have to be pretty desperate to pine for the happiness of the Cuban people who would leave Cuba like that if they had an opportunity to do so. So they always come up with excuses, but again, the excuses are pretty thin. Pretty thin. Right? It wasn't real socialism. Over and over and over and over again. And every commune fails, and every kibbutz fails, and every socialist experiment fails, and every, gang of friends who start their little utopia in the middle of nowhere fails. And there's always an excuse. They didn't do it quite right. It wasn't quite by the book. So why? And then why can't our intellectuals, smart guys, figure it out? So let's start with Friedrich Hayek. According to Tyler Cowen, I'm reading for Tyler Cowen. Economics Nobel laureate Friedrich Hayek attributed, socialism to mankind's atavistic instincts left over from earlier, poorer societies when extreme sharing was necessary. Now, it's not clear at all that extreme sharing was necessary ever in human societies. It's not clear why this idea of extreme sharing should be passed on as we become richer. It's not clear why extreme sharing should be passed on, particularly into societies where some are producing so much more than others. It's not clear why extreme sharing should be passed on when we know so much more about the world. It's not passed on in our genes. It's not in our DNA. So why haven't the, as Hayek would call them, cultural institutions adapted to the new world, where sharing is not positive, it's actually detrimental? Hayek knows socialism doesn't work, it's detrimental. Sharing on a social scale is detrimental. So anyway, the instinct to resent people, the instinct to resent people who have more, the instinct to demand sharing, I guess, is an instinct, and that is the explanation. Again, Tyler, Milton Friedman treated the socialists as though they were well-intentioned individuals who simply had not learned enough good economics. And yeah, I think Milton Friedman did treat them that way, but again, is that justified? Milton Friedman certainly did a pretty good job explaining the economics to them. I mean, in plain economic terms, and often did it in very plain terms. And even in terms, and this is a weakness of his, but even in terms of their own, kind of what system helps the poor the most, what system is most beneficial for the weakest. So even in terms that the socialists should respect in terms of the goals of the socialist, and yet he didn't manage to teach them economics. So why is it that it's so hard to teach socialist economics? And why, there are not many socialist economists. There are many statist economists, but not many socialist economists. And yet our economists can't teach our students that socialism doesn't work. Why? Tyler continues, Joseph Schumpeter believed it was the curse of capitalism that its intellectuals would always turn against it. An idea that was also seconded by Peter Nozick. And again, there's the intellectuals resent the fact that they're really, really smart, and they're at their universities, and they're doing this important, life-changing, crucial work, and yet they're not getting rich, and these entrepreneurs and businessmen are getting rich. So they hate the rich, they hate capitalism, the system that puts them in academia and makes them, in a sense, poor, and they resent the fact that the capitalists are so successful. Maybe. I mean, these weird psychological, all intellectuals are like this kind of attitude. Why do the intellectuals think that? Why aren't some of the intellectuals, at least, or a significant number of them, smart enough to figure it out? Among others, that the only reason they have even the job of intellectuals is because the capitalist is creating money enough to be able to fund the universities that they're in. But you go on and on. Why is it the intellectuals are so attracted to socialism? Is it just resentment? See, it's all presented as genetic and psychological, or ignorance. Ignorance, economics, and resentment, and it's all psychology. It's very unsatisfying. Peter Thiel, Tyler Cowen continues, Peter Thiel, more recently, has blamed student debt and high cost of buying a home. Yeah, that's the same as kissing, right? Quote, when one has too much student debt, or if housing is too unaffordable, then one will have negative capital for a long time. And if one has no stake in the capitalist system, then one may well turn against it. Really? I mean, every student always has had negative capital. Poor people, young people are typically poor, and they almost always have negative capital. People who came to America in the 19th century had negative capital. How does this explain them being socialist? Wouldn't you expect them then to be capitalists and embrace the system that allows them to get out of this situation of negative capital and move towards positive capital? And in particular, the educated who are smart and know that they're capable of earning and that they can have positive capital. They just have to, if they work hard and within a capitalist system, if they invest well, they will make money. So it's resentment and ignorance and, and genes and emotions. Now, Tyler says, quote, there's truth to all these hypotheses, and there are others yet. But focusing on 2025, I have more concrete and perhaps more depressing explanation. Socialism is surging right now because American society has simply turned negative. We complain more, we whine more, and we are more likely to dislike each other. And if we are more negative, that means we are more negative about everything around us, including capitalism, as if capitalism is around us. Big business has never been bigger, and we have never spent more time with it, whether it's scrolling on our smartphones, calling up an Uber, or flying to another city. So We're just negative. Again, a completely and utterly emotional explanation. We hate everything around us. We're just negative about everything. And the consequence of that is to say, chuck it all. We want socialism of all things, which if we just look around the world a little bit, we just open our eyes a little bit, if we just read a history book or two, we discover very, very quickly that socialism will actually make things a lot worse for us. We can pretend Cubans are happy, but that's a pretense. That is mythology. That is self-delusion on a grand scale. He writes, consider the kinds of socialist doctrines we see in the public sphere today. The core message is negative, and more of the hostility is directed toward billionaires. And even though the wealthiest of them typically have been fantastically productive innovators. Mamdani says that billionaires should not exist. It is more about tearing down the rich than raising the poor. Yes, that's true. But why? Because we're negative? Because we just don't like stuff? We just don't like things around us? We just are depressed? And now, he says, even staunch Democratic Party supporters like Matt Iglesias and Noah Smith have wondered whether parts of the progressive left might be explained in part by feelings of depression and also too high a desire to feel outrage. Matt even wrote, quote, more evidence of the increasingly porous boundaries between mental illness and left-wing politics. Remember, Matt is a leftist. Now, they also hate the right. They hate MAGA, more than ever before. People don't want their kids, Democrats don't want their kids to marry a Republican. Social media reinforces the negativity, right? Reinforces everything. Now, Tyler has a core theory about what caused these developments. And he has this theories about psychological contagion. If other people in society become grumpier, we are more likely to become grumpier too. If someone insults us, we're more likely to insult them back. If someone tries to cancel us out of a job and livelihood, we're more likely to retaliate and so on. When psychological contagion, this is a new term for me, is present, social trend can spread quickly, and they also can spread far and wide. If the mood in society becomes more negative, a small initial change in negativity can lead to much larger, longer run boost in bad feelings. It's all about the feelings, guys. I mean, this is Tyler Cowen. This is not some leftist hippie, right? I mean, he then makes the case that the years leading up to World War I, for instance, he says everybody became a lot more depressed. Everybody was a lot more negative. Again, no explanation why they became more depressed and why they became more negative. And he says one can debate the initial causes of such developments, but the relevant point is once they get started, they acquire momentum of their own. And look, I agree. Americans are way too negative. We've talked about this, about how Americans think they're poor. Young Americans think they're the poorest ever. They're not. People think that they can't afford a house unless you live on the West Coast or in New York and in a couple of other places. Most people can't afford a house. You can run the numbers. They think productivity hasn't matched. Or wages haven't matched productivity. They think a lot of bad things. The middle class is shrinking when actually it's becoming richer. Everybody thinks really bad things. There's definitely an epidemic of negativity. But is it really just caused by, is it just emotions? Now, it is interesting that his analysis does, in some respect, follow mine in terms of the specific causes of people's loss of trust, if you will, in the American system, loss of trust in whatever it is we call our mixed economy. And he, like I, go back to 9/11, And he says in 2001, hijackers flew planes into Twin Towers, a previously unimaginable event for most Americans. The United States was taken down a peg. The Second Iraq War then failed. The Great Recession came in 2008, following by a slow labor market bounce back. COVID and its aftermath were the next nightmare. Should it be such a huge surprise the negative feelings have dug in and sunk? There's a sense in which that's true. But you have to ask yourself, why were the hijackers able to fly those planes into the buildings? Why did we lose the Iraq War? And what was it about the 2008 recession in particular that drove people to have such a negative view of the current American system? Was it maybe the fact that everybody blamed it on capitalism, and therefore, capitalism must be bad? Or was it the fact that the response of politicians was to bail the banks out, even though they really didn't bail the banks out, but that's the perception? And COVID, what was it about COVID? Was it government overreach and statism and authoritarianism of the lockdowns? So yes, but what's driving all this? See, I think what's interesting is what's driving. I agree to some extent with Tyler. There's a crazy sense of negativity in the world today. He writes, one strength of the negative contagion explanation for socialist loyalties is that it helps to explain movements on the other side of the political spectrum as well, namely the right wing. And he shows that this negativity also appears on the right wing, particularly about the evil of the left and owning the libs and all of that. And he's right. But what explains it? To boil it down to a feeling can be an explanation. What actually explains it? And how do we get out of it? Now, he says we get out of it somehow. It's possible. This is what he says, which is scary. If you would like some good news, some more good news, and by the way, he says, look, we have the highest standard of living ever. And the highest standard of living for a big country in all the world by far. And he says, we have dramatically falling crime rates. I'm not the only one saying we have dramatically falling crime rates. I know half of you don't believe me, but we do. Crime rates are plummeting. Not just because Trump got elected, but they have been since 2023, or including 2023, since 2022. They went up 2020, 2021, 2022, and then have been plummeting since, back to the historically low crime rates of 2016, when Trump said there was carnage in the streets of America. So in spite of the Trump negativity, which fed off of the right-wing negativity, in spite of that, things are going pretty damn well, except for all the screwing up that Trump is doing. So he says, it is that societies can escape this track of back and forth nastiness they have in the past, such as when Europe built from the horrors of World War II. They had to go through World War II to get out of the melee. When America bounced back from the Civil War, they had to fight a civil war to get out of the melee. And now, as present-day Poland puts its socialism past behind it to become a highly successful and happy nation. They had to live through communism for 40 years in order to come out of the melee. All right, so that is Tyler Cowell's explanation. So what is actually going on here? Why is socialism so appealing to so many people? And again, it's not a majority. It's certainly not a majority once you take into account older individuals. And generally, Gen Z, the youngest group, is less socialist than the millennials, slightly older than them. So it's not all socialism, but I think the general phenomena of statism on the right and the left is all driven by very similar motivations. Although I think the socialists, in some way, are just more idealistic than the ones on the right. Although I think that the new right has its own form of idealism, which is similar to socialism. But socialism is viewed generally as nicer and more pleasant than the kind of nationalism of the right. So I think Tyler's really onto something, not by naming emotions, but with this historical perspective of the 21st century, really, in America. And, so it really does have to do with the fact that our current system, which many people, unfortunately, think of as a capitalist system. We are the most capitalist country in the world, and they think of America as capitalist. Our current system has repeatedly failed us over the last 25 years. And it's repeatedly failed us in very big, visible ways. Big, visible ways that have kind of undermined the fact that in spite of all those big ways in which we failed, economically, we've done pretty damn well across every income group and across almost every sector. We've done really pretty damn well. Surprisingly so. I wouldn't have expected us to do this well. So, I agree that it started in 2001, where the question of, well, are we strong? Do we have a competent military? Can we defend ourselves? And can we project power across the world? And can we bring our vision of liberty and freedom to the rest of the world? Can we be a shining city on the hill? And the answer was clearly no. And to blame for that was not the particular policies of the Bush administration. It was not the particular perspective of the Bush administration. It was not the particular way we fought a war. It was not the fact that we let al-Qaeda attack us. It was not the fact that Clinton didn't preempt al-Qaeda. It was not the fact that Bush, engaged in self-sacrificial wars. It was none of that. It was just a doubt, a general doubt that is now well established on the right as well as the left about American efficaciousness, about our military power, about our value as a nation, and about the value of our political system and its ability to be projected out there into the world. And you can see that on the right. Maybe it's more extreme on the right when it comes to foreign policy, because on the right used to be, we're strong. Conservatives used to be tough on foreign policy. They used to be assertive. They used to be pro, self-defense and projecting power out there. And since 9/11, they basically becomes the biggest wusses in the world. They don't want to fight anybody, and they don't. We're no longer. Think about J.D. Vance. We're no longer a country of ideas. Ideas are what we thought we were pre-9/11. Post 9/11, well, if the ideas were so good, how can we fail all the time? How come we can't even beat the Taliban? Or we can't even beat Iraq? We can't even win a stupid war in the Middle East. It can't be that our ideas are so good. So let's retrench back to people and place. And that doesn't commit us to anything out there. And of course, if our ideas are not that good, then, well, Islamism isn't an ideological threat to us. As long as they stay where they are and we stay where we are and we do our thing and they do their thing, their ideas are just as good as our ideas. I mean, conservatives have become multiculturalists, right? Their ideas for them are good. Our ideas for us is good. We just need to purify ours, kick out all the people who don't quite belong and who don't fit, and just live our little cult so that they can live their cult, and each one is separated, and that's the best way to run the world. That's national conservatism.